How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to some more Mount & Blade to Bannerlord. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Q&A number 3 for War Sales, the up-and-coming DLC, which we're hoping to get. They said early fall, so maybe like end of September, beginning of September, probably around about that time. But we are still yet to actually receive a release date. I'll be sure to let you guys know over on community page as soon as we do. But yeah, they did drop this brand new Q&A, kind of going over a lot of the stuff that we got in that big setting sales dev blog, but there is also some other stuff here and there as well, and basically answering more questions that people have. It's always good, I think, to just kind of stick together a video of this stuff because a lot of you guys won't bother to read this, so it's just kind of a quick summary of everything. This was a little bit short as well, so I'll try and get through it quickly. So we start off with the first question, which is the new expanded changed map from War Sales also in the base game, or do we have two different world maps? And they respond, there will be two separate world maps, the existing one for the base game and the new one for War Sales. The latter will contain changes relevant to naval gameplay and the new Nord faction discussed in our last dev blog. So this is probably the most interesting question of them all, because it does kind of confirm that War Sales is going to be a separate module in the game. So you know, like when you load up Bannerlord and you get all your mod list together and stuff, and then you have all like the sandbox core stuff. Well, I imagine there is just going to be a War Sales module that tags along that and gives you an option to load into the War Sales map / world. Now this is interesting for a few reasons. One is going to be, I'm very intrigued and a little bit worried what this is going to do to modding, because a lot of the big mods are going to want to utilize the awesome new ship stuff in War Sales and implement that in. And does that mean that people who don't own War Sales are not going to be able to use that and download that mod? It's going to come down to how quickly and how separate the two are. Like if you just don't have War Sales, are you completely locked out of mods that do use it? Or are then mechanics done? I imagine it's going to be, a little bit rough for people who maybe don't pick up War Sales when it does come to modding. But that is something we're going to have to find out. Also, what happens if they make another DLC and add in another part of the map? Are they going to be able to combine that with War Sales, or is it going to be another module with another map? You know, I'm just kind of thinking into the future, because hopefully we do get more DLCs with more interesting mechanics and stuff. And are they kind of digging themselves a hole by doing this and creating separate maps for each DLC? Or are they going to be able to just build upon this War Sales map? But what happens if you buy the new DLC but don't own War Sales? You can see what I'm saying. It kind of feels like they're digging themselves a bit of a grave that then they're going to struggle to kind of add on later in the development of Bannerlord if we do get another DLC. Hopefully we do. But yeah, again, maybe they thought of that and they've got stuff to do it. Again, I'm not a huge technician type of guy, so again, it just kind of, for me, feels like, oh, I don't know, is this kind of going to hurt the game in the long run? We'll have to wait and find out. Next, we move on to a simple one. Will bridges interrupt sailing on rivers? And no, they won't. You'll basically be able to sail under them without any issue. I think if this wasn't the case, it would be kind of awkward to traverse a lot of the rivers and lakes. Again, if you're interested in the new map, they showed off a bunch of it in the latest Setting Sails dev blog, which I also covered on the channel, so I'll probably leave that in the pinned comments, so you guys, if you want to go see more about that, can go back and check that out. They also ask about how many towns and castles the new Nord faction will control. This is quite interesting. They have 4 towns and then 10 castles, which I think is obviously extremely low on the town front. Compared to the castles. I think the empires but basically every other faction has at least 6 towns. I'm pretty sure, even the Kuzites, who are obviously very nomadic in army style, etc. So it's kind of interesting. Again, it's going to be a completely different faction, and I guess you'll be able to move around the campaign map maybe a little bit quicker with boats if you are playing with Nords. And it does also speak to their playstyle and stuff. And I would imagine all 4 of these towns are also going to be naval bases as well. I can't imagine any of these being landlocked. So again, does also speak to maybe having a bit of a worse economy for the Nords as well, because you only have 4 towns to produce tax throughout your entire kingdom. Unfortunately, that doesn't really matter in Bannerlord. The economy is just a floating thing that doesn't really affect gameplay. But you know what I mean? Hopefully this can, like, be shown somehow, the Nord's struggling with less of an economy because they have less of less towns to produce taxes and less trading. But maybe you could also argue that they trade more because of their boats. I don't know. Again, just me rattling off ideas. They then also talk about what food and what will villages produce in the Nordic lands. They go on to basically talk about the fish being the main savior for the Nordic people. They don't really farm grain up in the north in the icy lands, so they're going to be heavily reliant on fish across most of their empire, and then they'll be able to bring in kind of like grain from trade and other things, and then also bring it up to par with grain. And then they also talk about I think the resources, the new resources they're adding in is a walrus ivory and whale oil for trade goods. So I imagine maybe getting that stuff in the north and then sailing it down to the empire or the Azerai could probably be pretty profitable. Again, this just kind of like, I feel like there's such there's nothing really, like, it doesn't matter what food or grain, or like, it doesn't matter what food you're actually eating in the game. Like, there's no bonuses, there's no negatives. You just go, oh, there could just be one big resource called food and it would be exactly the same. So yeah, it's kind of cool to have more fish, a bit more lore friendly and stuff. But again, like, I feel like it doesn't do anything. You're just basically selecting a blanked out box called food and bringing it over. Like, it could just be army supplies, for example. There's no real difference if it's food, grain, or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's still cool lore wise. Now, this one was a little bit of a shame. I feel like they could have done something cool with this. But yeah, what will happen to the islands between the Azerai and the Empire lands? If you guys remember to the Bannerlord map, and if I whip it up right here, you can see that these two islands right here between the Empire lands and of course the Azerai lands, they basically say what will happen to these islands between them, and they say they're no longer on the war sales map, which I feel like is a shame. You could have had, like, I don't know, like, we're talking about colonization up here in the north with the Nordic factions. Could have been kind of cool to have, like, the Empire bringing and colonizing these lands. It's not like they don't look fertile, but I guess they wanted to, like, spread out this sea a little bit more and give more access to, like, naval gameplay. But still, I don't know, it would have been cool to have something here still nonetheless. They also talk about how will ships enter the Pacific Sea due to the passages between the Empire. So again, they're talking about, I believe, this stuff here. Yeah, like these passes here. And then they're also talking about this little passage here, the awesome place where you can trap all of the Azerai caravans as they try and escape out through the Empire. And they say to open the seas, some lands have also been given away. 2 major crossings, one narrow land bridge have been removed. The southern corridor between the Kozak and the northern passages linking Omar to Vastapol. This allows travel between the 2 major bodies. So they're also talking about this one, sorry, yeah. So I don't think they're talking about this one, my mistake. They're not talking about these ones. However, I imagine these rivers will link up, and probably this little land bridge right here has been removed and you can probably sail this entire way. But yeah, in the dev blog, they're talking about this one right here, and they're talking about this one right here. So it basically connects up so you can sail from here, go all the way out, and go basically circumnavigate the globe. Then we move on to when forming a naval army. Do each party have their own and maintain its own ships, or can army leaders supply vessels for everybody? And basically they do summarize that everybody is up to, like, maintaining and taking control of your own ships and stuff. So if the parties have ships, it's up to them to maintain them, pay the repair costs and everything. However, if you are going on route and you are getting people who don't have enough ships to actually field, like, and have soldiers on the boats, the party will contribute to that. And so basically, if I have 10 ships and my ally who I'm bringing into the army only has 2, but he has too many soldiers to fit on them 2 boats, then I'll give him some ships to basically sort that out and make it so that he can actually join the army as we set sail. And again, that's going to be functional to everybody else along the route. They also say if you're in the middle of sea and you kick someone out of your ship, they're going to be able to basically just jump on that life raft, take the food and the resources they need, and they're going to just sail back on to land as quickly as possible with the quickest route. They also mention as well that you're going to be able to see how many ships people have as well when you are bringing them to army. So again, that's something you're going to take into consideration when you're building up the army. And then we move on to, in the previous post, you mentioned how horses take up inventory space on ships and do not provide naval speed bonuses. Does this apply to cavalry units, and will the AI have the same restrictions as a player? Yes, it includes both cavalry and horse archers. This system benefits factions like the Nords, who rely more on maritime troops, while limiting cavalry-heavy factions like the Kuzites. The AI follows the same restrictions. So basically, if you have a lot of horsemen in your army or whatever, you're going to not get any bonuses at sea. And I wouldn't be surprised if maybe maritime troops gave you a bit of a speed boost at sea, just basically like improved sailors or something. And again, that'd be a nice way to really start to differentiate a lot of the factions as well, now that we have two styles of combat. Then they also mentioned, will we have skills or companions that can predict storms? This is kind of interesting. So they basically say the Boatswan skill will reduce the negative effects through the storms themselves. However, the storms themselves aren't predictable. These dynamic weather events will move across the sea and deal damage to ships caught in them. Players will be able to spot storms forming thanks to the visual cues like dark clouds and thunder during a brief build-up phase. While you can't forecast their paths, careful navigation and good ship stats can keep your path safe. So yeah, I can't imagine like you're ever going to deliberately get caught in a storm, or like I feel like people are smart enough and it's not going to be so like quick that you're just stuck there in the eye of the storm. I imagine you're going to see one forming and can probably avoid it most of the time. However, if you do end up getting a little bit caught, one of the new skills is going to be able to negate a lot of the effects for speed debuffs and other things. But also, I'm interested to see exactly what happens when, say for example, I'm being chased by a large army and I go into a storm. Is the AI going to forego that, or can I bait them through? Say I've got a really good Boatswan skill and I can negate a lot of the effects, but the AI can't, and they just get tuned up chasing me through a storm. I think that could be kind of an interesting mechanic in the game. We'll have to see how that does play out. Now we also get to the next question, which is, can you order your ships to meet you at the port while you're somewhere else, or do you need to be at the port? And they say you do need to be at the port yourself. Ships can only be summoned to the port you're currently at. So again, this will be very similar to the way that you can basically message companions to come and meet you, and they just come over and join your army. I'm not the biggest fan of this mechanic. I kind of get it, but it just feels like very... I'm not losing anything by leaving my ship behind, and I can just auto spawn it wherever I am. It feels a little bit gamey to me. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, I guess. Maybe gameplay wise it's going to make life a lot easier, but I feel like it could be kind of a cool idea, having to leave behind a skeleton crew on your ship, and then that way it can come over and join you. But maybe that just didn't work out like that. I don't know. As I said, I just feel like it's a bit weird. I can just like auto teleport an abandoned ship to me at any port. I don't know. Either way, we then move on to, will ships always have a fixed waiting time to arrive or summon? And then they also then just mentioned that basically it depends where you are. Again, like when you summon a companion to your army, it's just going to be however far you left your ship and however far you are. But that's not really an issue, right? You're never normally in that much of a rush in the game. Then, if a town is captured while ships are docked there, will you lose them? And does the same apply if enemy ships are docked there in the town? And they say no, ships will automatically leave the port when the town changes hands, regardless of who owns them. However, they will not be interactable. You'll need to visit another port to summon them. That is like so lame. That is like, this is probably the one thing I dislike the most about this. Like, why? So you're telling me I've taken a city and there's no ships to loot, not even to like sell or break down or whatever. They just automatically get out, even though say I'm blockading the port and I'm sieging it from land, so there's no escape. I just feel like that's such like a cop out of just like, oh no, yeah, they magically teleport and you can't interact with the ships and they just, whatever. Like it's just like, yeah, I think that's kind of lame, personally anyway. But again, maybe it's just like a game mechanic that just had to kind of play out that way. But yeah, personally, not a huge fan of that. And then we go, do breaking naval blockades take place in the port or open water and near river towns and river scenes used? They take place in coastal waters for seaside towns, and river battles are triggered for riverside towns. Again, I kind of get that, making what like 40 new siege blockade port maps, like it's not realistic, even though they are going to be charging. They haven't officially announced it, but it was leaked on the PlayStation Network. Again, this could be completely different when they actually do release it, but it was on the PlayStation Store on June 17th for $30. So if they're charging $30, I don't know, maybe a few could have gone a long way, but then I guess it's kind of weird only doing a few. So I'm actually not mad at this. As much as I would like cool custom blockade battles, it is fine. I kind of get it that, doing 40 plus maps for everything can get a bit much. Next question is a bit more about how will the AI nobles decide whether to follow you on land or naval, and they basically they'll take into account like the ships and the quickest way to you, and kind of weigh that up with the equipment and how good ships they have and stuff like that. So basically the AI will choose the best path on with the equipment and the distance that they have to you, to try and make it to you as quickly as possible. They also as well talk about how AI will actually buy ships in the game. So how and when will the AI nobles decide to acquire ships? And basically as their army grows, they'll look to pick up more ships. However, they're much more likely to be a bit more flexible on their ship setup. So instead of just buying 4 of the biggest ships in the game, they're generally going to try and get a wide range of ships so that they're better suited for every situation. They're more likely to get one of each of the 3 sizes of ships for small, medium, and large ships, rather than just get like 3 heavies or 2 mediums and 1 light. They're more likely to get one of each, so that they're less likely to get stuck at sea, or they're less likely to, lose out if they lose a ship. They're also always going to plan on trying to get more capacity than they need, however, not being skeleton crewed. So if they do lose ships in battle, they're not going to then be completely stranded at sea. They're going to try and to accommodate with that, which all sounds kind of cool. However, I would like the idea of seeing a bit more like cultural specific ship setup. So if I'm going against the Empire, maybe the Empire are more likely to have much larger ships in their navy compared to something like the Nords, who I imagine would be much more likely to get the smaller ships, the faster one, the mobile ones, looking to board with their superior marines, stuff like that. But either way, that still all makes sense and looks cool nonetheless. They also then talk about why it's not coming out on only coming out on current gen consoles, and obviously, it's just because of hardware issues. Apparently there's a lot of mechanics and stuff which the older ones just can't handle, which I guess does make sense. Stuff like that is going to be getting phased out, and it has been a while since the older gens out there. Again, it does completely suck if you are on an older gen and won't be able to play this DLC. I completely get that. But also, again, I guess at some point they do have to start cutting that stuff off, as much as it does suck for those people who do have it. And then the final one, they talk about so this is kind of interesting. They talk about, besides the announced towns and castle projects changes to the base game, will there be any other adjustments to settlement income? And they now say that tariffs are going to be up to like 60% in trade heavy towns. Again, I feel like it's you can see that I'm like getting triggered of this already. Like, what do you mean trade heavy towns? I've never once thought about a trade heavy town in the game. I've got 2,000 hours. Maybe I'm playing Bannerlord wrong, but again, the economy is just so forgettable. Like, you can have some fun with it, but as soon as you get like 100k, you just never have to worry about anything ever again. You just fight battles and make loads of money. And there's not enough of like an economy trading type of gameplay mechanics in the game to even worry about that. So when they say trade heavy towns, like, I'm just like, what defines a trade heavy town? Because every town to me looks exactly the same. Maybe they have some more resources, but I never really see a difference in my income here and there. But they have said that they are going to be now making 30% on average and can reach up to 60%. So trade is going to be a bit more important. Again, they need to add in an actual trading mechanic, like being able to, like, how cool would it be if you could take the stuff that your workshops produce, make a trade route, and then your caravan gets sent off and actually does the trade route and sells in specific cities, rather than just, going off randomly and hoping for the best and all this AI logic. Like, give me control. Let me put stuff inside of the caravan to go and sell. Let me put troops that I've commissioned so my caravans don't just insta die. Stuff like that I think would be such a great way of improving it. However, they also have spoken about they are looking to change how towns and projects work in the game. I vaguely remember this back when they first announced War Sales saying something like this. They also remember that it didn't sound like they were really doing much to the towns and castle projects. It was like a very like, yeah, we're going to change some stuff around with towns and castle projects. And honestly, this thing needs a complete overhaul if it wants to actually be good. Again, 2,000 hours in the game, and this is such a forgettable feature. And it shouldn't be. It should be one of the best features in the game. Getting your first town and building it up and having to bring resources to work on projects and stuff. Like, oh, that could be so much fun. And actually having a tie to your settlement because you've gone around Calradia finding hardwood and iron and nails, and you've brought them back to your city to help with the building of certain buildings, and you've poured money into it. And like, I don't know, you could just do like quests where you get a quest of like improving the workshop, bring in these resources, and you go and you collect them resources, you bring them back to the town, and you start production on the city, and then you get another quest 7 days later or whatever to take on the next stage and stuff. Like, that would just add so much extra flavor to the game. And again, I'm just man dreaming, an old man yapping on his porch right now. They also talk about modding as well, saying that they've experimenting with more of the improvements to servers. I don't play enough multiplayer anymore to really tell if this is working or whatever. And they also do mention that the new XML editor, which does sound really good. I know I've been a bit negative in this, but yeah, they do mention that the new XML editor, which apparently is going to be quite big for a lot of modders. Apparently the XML editing right now is absolutely atrocious, so a lot of people are quite excited for this. It is going to also work for the base game as well, so not just War Sales, which again is probably a no-brainer. Like, why would you not do it? But again, it's awesome to at least see it. So yeah, that's going to be it for the War Sales Q&A number 3. I imagine we'll be getting a release date this month in the end of July. Like, I would imagine we would be, or maybe at the start of August, we'll be getting one. I think we'll be getting one fairly soon. So keep an eye on the channel for that. Thank you guys so much for watching today. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, you can go over to this thread. I'll leave a link to it down below in the description and ask them yourself for the next Q&A. Hopefully, we get some goddamn gameplay going forward. I think gameplay is the next thing. This the setting sails vlog that they did do was really good. Like, I enjoyed reading this. This is more of the stuff I want to see. And I think next, they've talked about a lot of stuff. I want to actually start to see some gameplay going forward. So hopefully we get to see some naval battles. That's what I'm most interested in. That's going to be whether or not it's worth paying the $30 or whatever they're going to charge for it, is whether or not the naval gameplay is actually good. So yeah, drop a like, drop a comment down below if you enjoy me covering this, and I'll see you guys in the next one.